Okay, so today is NHL free agency, and in the build up to this year's draft and free agency, there has actually been a lot of talk about potential future NHL expansion past 32 teams. And that talk was going on when the Arizona Coyotes were actually relocated to Salt Lake City in Utah to become the Utah Mammoth. Now, obviously, before that relocation took place, even though technically it is an expansion, because Alex Marello, the former owner of the Coyotes, actually kept the naming rights for a while, and the franchise is actually in hiatus. There has been talk for a while now about expanding further. So, the way I've done this is I've looked at metro population of the candidate cities, and we know there's many cities in the US and states for that matter that have put forward proposals for or declared interest for expansion. The big one at the moment is Atlanta. Atlanta seems to be the closest to starting the expansion process. We know that there are multiple interested groups, and one of those interested groups has actually got permission, it seems, to build a brand new arena in Fulton County in the Atlanta metro. Now, Atlanta itself as a metro has 6.3 million people living in that metro, and of course people will say, but the NHL's been there twice before and failed twice before. Now, the building that the Thrashers used is still actually used. It's still an active arena in the Atlanta metro area. The reason why the Thrashers failed was not because of fans turned up. It was because ownership, and they couldn't sort out a lease on the building. Now, that building is older. It will need a lot of upgrades to be of current NHL standard, but there are plans to build a brand new arena in Fulton County in the Atlanta metro. So Atlanta's got 6.3 million people, and that's one of the biggest metros where the NHL does not currently have a presence. But many will say the NHL's been there twice before and failed twice before. Firstly with the Flames franchise, and secondly with the Thrashers franchise. And in both cases, the franchise in the 70s was moved to Calgary, and in 2011 moved to Winnipeg. So the irony is Canada got two teams because Atlanta failed. Now, the first time round, fans weren't interested at the time. They couldn't draw fans. The second time round, bad ownership and arena issues caused the Atlanta franchises to move. But Atlanta has put a lot of interest in becoming the 33rd NHL franchise. And that is interesting. A lot has changed since 2011 in the demographics and the makeup of the Atlanta metro population. And Atlanta and Georgia is a sports-mad location in the US. And the NHL wants those 6.3 million eyes on their product. And there are fans in Atlanta left over from the Thrashers and the Flames. And there will be some caution there, but it looks very likely that Atlanta will be the 33rd team. Now, Houston comes up in conversation as well. So Houston, when Vegas entered the league and when Seattle entered the league, were part of the bidding process to be a NHL franchise. They declared their interest way back when Arizona, the Coyotes, were having their struggles before they moved to Utah. Again, Houston was raised in conversation. Now, the Houston Metro has 7.1 million people, and professional hockey has been played in Houston before, way back when in the WHA days and in the AHL with the Houston Aeros. So hockey has been played there, and if you were to expand to Atlanta, Houston would be a logical second pit stop to make the 34th team, to keep the conferences balanced, one in the East, one in the West. 7.1 million people in the Houston Metro, and Texas is a sports-mad state. The Dallas Stars have been a success. There were concerns when the Minnesota North Stars moved to Dallas back in the 90s that it wouldn't work. It has worked. They've won a Stanley Cup and been to multiple Stanley Cup finals. They've established a presence in the state of Texas, and you can build a natural rivalry. You can build a natural rivalry within the state of Texas with Dallas and Houston. And again, there is an interested ownership group. They've put forward applications to be an expansion team before, most likely during the Vegas expansion and obviously with Seattle. And there was talk of the Coyotes some various points over the last decade or so relocating to Houston. It would have been a logical location for the team to be located to. Ultimately, they end up in Salt Lake City, known as the Utah Mammoth. Now, guess what? Phoenix and the state of Arizona appears again. Now, the Phoenix metro has 4.9 million people in it. It is a massive metro. And you could argue, look, Phoenix failed because of ownership. And that is partly on the NHL for allowing bad ownership to continue for as long as it did. There are multiple arenas in the Phoenix and Tucson metro areas that are of a size to be NHL standard. The problem is the Phoenix Suns owner doesn't want to share his arena in downtown Phoenix with any NHL franchise. They used to share, the Coyotes and the Phoenix Suns used to share the same arena back in the day. There are other arenas around, but a few bridges have been burned due to poor ownership of the Coyotes in the 90s, 2000s and 2010s into the 2020s. But the NHL has given permission for Phoenix or Arizona a 5-year first refusal to, well, reapply for NHL membership. So we could see a team back in the Phoenix Metro or in the state of Arizona within the next 10 years. And with a 4.9 million metro, and I think about 7 or 8 million people in total living in the state of Arizona, that is again a big chunk of eyes on the product. There are hockey fans in the Phoenix Metro. There are hockey fans in the Tucson Metro. The Tucson Metro itself is about 1.2 million. So I put Phoenix / Arizona as a wider coverage, but I used the Phoenix Metro number of population. And the NHL was very, very keen that the Phoenix experiment succeeded. Had they got the right ownership and got a building, I have no doubt it would have succeeded. There are hockey fans there. You do not get Austin Matthews, for example, without the Coyotes being a team for as long as they were. But it has left a bitter taste in the mouth in both Atlanta and Phoenix, with teams being forced to relocate. And in Atlanta and Phoenix's case, Atlanta the second time around was arena issues and bad ownership forcing those teams out of those locations. But the Coyotes had a presence in Arizona in the desert for a very, very long time. Other cities that have come up in the conversation with smaller metros are New Orleans. They have publicly come out and said they are interested in the NHL coming to town. And the state governor has also given his backing to any potential NHL expansion bid by the state or the city of New Orleans. Now, I've done a video on this. The New Orleans metro has 1.27 million inhabitants. It is a smaller market than Phoenix, Houston and Atlanta, but of a similar size to Salt Lake City, where the Utah Mammoth now play the former Phoenix / Arizona Coyotes. So while it is a smaller market, and of course Louisiana and New Orleans aren't necessarily the wealthiest locations in the US for spending power of its citizens, that's still a sizable metro area. It's bigger than any of the potential Canadian metros that could potentially have a team, and it's bigger than some current locations that the NHL in the US is currently in. So could it work in New Orleans? Well, potentially, given again the right ownership and the right hockey operations, getting the right people as GM, director of hockey operations, president of hockey operations, and the right coach. You could put a team there and it could be very, very successful. But would there be fans in New Orleans, considering it is more of a NFL state and an NFL city with the Saints and the Pelicans in the NBA? But the NHL has had meetings with representatives from Atlanta, Houston, Phoenix and New Orleans. And then we get to some of the smaller metros like Omaha, Nebraska. That has come up in conversation. There has been some interest from Omaha, Nebraska, right on the border with Iowa. Now, Iowa do obviously have an AHL affiliate of an NHL team, but Omaha, Nebraska, the population's it's under 1 million people. For the metro, it's 967,604 people as of the last census live in Omaha, Nebraska. So it would be classed as a small market. It would be classed as a smaller market. But it's still bigger than any of the potential Canadian locations. And I will get to one particular Canadian location where people want to have a team. Most NHL fans want a team to return to this location. But Omaha, Nebraska has come up in conversation. It has come up in conversation. But then you look at the list of cities or states that have declared interest, and it would completely imbalance the divisions if they were to stay and conferences if they were to stay. I think the long-term plan for the NHL is to have a 40-team league or a 36-team league to balance everything. Omaha, Nebraska is a bit left field. But it's an interesting one. Nebraska doesn't actually have any professional major league teams in the state, Nebraska or the city. So it is a potential location, but it's a risk because it is that smaller market. And again, it's in American football country and baseball country. Would there be enough sports fans in the city of Omaha or the state of Nebraska, which is only about 1.7 million people interested in ice hockey, to turn up to games to fill an arena on a nightly basis? I think in Atlanta, Houston, and Phoenix, you would probably have, given the right ownership and given a very, very competitive team, yes, you would easily sell out an arena with that kind of population size. But Omaha, Nebraska, are there enough sports fans in the city or the state of Nebraska to turn up? And that would be a concern. And also the corporate money as well. This is where the corporate sponsorship also has a part to play. I believe all these locations could easily fill an NHL arena of between 16 and 19,000 people. But is there enough corporate money behind that, and are there enough fans with enough money in their pockets to buy the merchandise, buy the tickets, buy the TV subscriptions to make it worthwhile for the NHL to go to these locations? Because at the moment there is a revenue sharing scheme in place for those franchises that don't make a profit, and teams do dip into that. They do dip into that revenue sharing. So the NHL would rather every franchise be profitable and making money. Omaha is one of those risky ones. Kansas City. Now, the NHL has been to Kansas City before. Didn't work back in the 70s. Kansas City and the metro surrounding it currently has a metro population of 2.3 million. And again, another Western location. Most of the conversation around potential expansion, most of the locations that have put their hand up and said we are interested or it could work, are in the West. And so there would have to be some kind of realignment of divisions and conferences, unless the NHL just goes for a straight league and then tries to work out a balanced schedule. But Kansas City, the NHL's been there before. It didn't work. They ended up, moving on. The Kansas City Scouts were a team for a while. It didn't work. But again, is Kansas City a location that could work? Well, they do actually have an arena. They do actually have an arena big enough for the NHL. But again, it's a location. Are there actually enough hockey fans in the city and the state of Kansas, and into Missouri for that matter, outside of St. Louis? Are there enough potential fans who are sports fans who could potentially be swayed to watch the NHL or even AHL if you were to put an affiliate there? It could be profitable. Cincinnati's another one. Metro population of 2.27 million. Ohio, is seen as more of a traditional location because it's in the north to northeast of the US. Obviously, Columbus has a team. Could it work? I mean, we had the Cleveland Barons also in Ohio. Could Cincinnati work as a location? Or is that too much of Major League Baseball and NFL? Have they already far too entrenched with their fan bases for the NHL to make a mark? And it is a sizable metro as Cincinnati. It's bigger than Omaha. It's just slightly smaller than Kansas City. It's bigger than New Orleans. But it's significantly smaller than Phoenix, Houston, and Atlanta, where there are stronger bids in the pipeline and stronger interest in the pipeline. But Cincinnati, could it work? It's not a million miles away from, it's in the Great Lakes region where a lot of American hockey players are born and raised. Ohio does already have an NHL franchise in Columbus, so you can again build that natural rivalry with an interstate rivalry with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Much like Houston, you can have a rivalry with Dallas, and you could potentially sell that as an intercity rivalry within the state of Ohio. Could it work? Are there enough fans willing to spend money on NHL merchandise, going to games, again buying those TV and streaming subscriptions for the NHL to be profitable and successful in this location? And then we look at Canada. Most NHL fans, even down in the US, want to see a team back in Quebec City. They want to see a return of the Nordiques. Now, the metro population is smaller than any of the US metros that we've discussed, 839,311. So it is a smaller market. It's actually smaller than Winnipeg when it comes to market size and metro size. So, look, they would sell out a building. They've got a building. Quebecor has built a big arena where they play junior hockey and minor league hockey. It seats nearly 19,000. It's one of the bigger arenas for hockey in North America. But it would cost more because of the strength of the Canadian dollar, or weakness of the Canadian dollar versus the US dollar. So when it would cost $1 billion in expansion fee, which is something else that needs to be discussed, it'd be nearly 1.3, 1.4 billion Canadian. Would Quebecor and any other potential investors be willing to spend that kind of money to get a team in Quebec? Absolutely. They would sell out that arena every night of the week. Every home game would be a sellout, regardless. There is a fan base there. But the NHL seems to be more keen on building new fans rather than moving to a location where there are existing fans. But you automatically get a rivalry with Ottawa and Montreal, straight up, in Quebec City, and Toronto. You automatically have a revival of that rivalry from the 80s and 90s when the Nordiques were last in the NHL before they were moved to Colorado to become the Avalanche. A lot of the Canadian players come from the province of Quebec or from the Quebec City metro of the French Canadian players. That both Montreal and Quebec City have produced multiple NHL players and many Hall of Famers from those two locations. It will work, but you look at the metro size, and then you've got to think of the corporate sponsorship. You will sell out the building, absolutely. The TV viewership will be fantastic. It may actually impact US teams as well, and other Canadian teams, where they want to see the Nordiques in town, but it's a smaller metro, and the weakness of the Canadian dollar sort of goes against Quebec City. And then we have Hamilton, Ontario, in the Toronto metro, though Hamilton itself has its own metro, as classed as its own separate metro in the golden horseshoe of that part of Canada, just south of Toronto. It's in the wider Toronto extended metro. 785,184 people come under the Hamilton metro as of latest statistics. Again, you would sell out an arena there easily, absolutely sell out an arena there. But the Buffalo Sabres and the Maple Leafs will probably try and block a team in Hamilton because they fear that they could take fans away from them. Look, the Maple Leafs have there's always a massive queue for season tickets to the Maple Leafs, but not everyone who lives in the Toronto or Hamilton area is a Maple Leafs fan. A lot of fans in that part of Ontario actually support the Red Wings or the Buffalo Sabres, and they will go cross-border to watch games. It will work in Hamilton. There are a lot of Canadian players born in Ontario from Hamilton playing in the NHL. You know there are fans there, but again, the NHL wants to try new markets and get new fans to the product. They already know they've got existing fans in Ontario and Quebec. And then we get to the real left field, where we nearly had a team in the 80s. Saskatoon in Saskatchewan. The St. Louis Blues nearly moved there in 1983, which was blocked at the last minute. Now, the Saskatoon Metro is tiny. It is small. It's only 317,480 people, as of latest up-to-date stats. Again, you will sell a building out. You would sell out every night. Again, a lot of NHL players and a lot of NHL fans come from Saskatchewan. There's a fair few NHLers who've come through junior hockey in the province of Saskatchewan and in Regina and Saskatoon, but it's a tiny metro in comparison to the others on the list. And again, you've got to find someone willing to spend over $1 billion, most likely, considering what the expansion fee was for Seattle, which was significantly more than what it was for Vegas, and Vegas was $500 million expansion fee. And with the value of every single team going up on the Forbes list and Sportico, and when they do valuations of what franchises are worth, every single NHL franchise is now worth more than $1 billion. So in that alone, with those smaller population sizes, the weakness of the Canadian dollar against the US, it makes it highly unlikely. However, we want another Canadian team, and it would actually work having a Canadian team, you would have to try and find an owner or ownership group of multiple investors willing to spend 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 billion dollars Canadian, $1 billion US, in expansion fees to get a team there. Now, I think most likely we end up in Atlanta and Houston. I think it's actually going to be sooner than some people think. A lot of hockey fans and a lot of experts are thinking more 2030. I think it could be sooner than that. I think it could be 2027, 2028. With the expansion of the CBA, we're yet to still see full details on that. I think Atlanta and Houston come in as a pair. I think Phoenix does come back in, and then they've got to find another city in the East, and that most likely, if we're looking at this, would be Quebec or Cincinnati, just from the locations that I've listed here. But again, I would say they're going to do it by pairs. I can see the NHL going to a 40-team league. I can. Whether that's a good or bad thing, people say talent dilution. The growth in the sport in the US has clearly been there. Canada continues to produce players at a fantastic rate, and the population of Canada has also grown. Even since Vegas and Seattle joined the league, the population has grown, partly due to people coming into Canada as immigrants, but also births as well. So there's those future potential junior players that will be draft eligible at some point in the future down the line. Look, Quebec City, Hamilton, they're very likely. There is a chance that they could enter the league. Quebec City and Quebecor were did put a bid in before Vegas were given the expansion rights in 2017, and they were in the conversation. They then pulled back from the conversation in regards to when Seattle came in as the 32nd franchise. But with Atlanta showing such strong interest in the last 18 months, and that is sort of building some momentum, the NHL's hand may be forced. If the right ownership group finally gets plans in place for an up-to-date arena and is willing to spend the money. We know Houston's potential owner, is willing to spend the money. We know there's several ownership groups in the Phoenix, Arizona area willing to spend the money. Again, an arena needs to sort of happen there, although there are arenas available in both Phoenix and Tucson that could be brought up to NHL standard or are NHL standard. I mean, it's about getting the right ownership groups in place. Some of these are more like left field, like Omaha and Saskatoon are a bit more left field and highly unlikely to happen. But I can see the NHL has had plans for years to have a 40-team league. They wanted to have a whole European division to bring it up to 40 teams at one point, and that is no joke. 20 or 30 years ago, they wanted to have a European division. So the thinking from the NHL for many, many years is to eventually reach 40 teams. I think it's most likely Atlanta and Houston come in within the next 4 to 5 years. I think it's sooner than that. I think potentially by as early as 2028. Phoenix is most likely going to come in as well within the next 5 to 10 years. And then you've got to find another team in the East to make it a balanced, all divisions balanced, all conferences balanced, make it 36 teams. I can see that happening. Now, how quickly this timeline happens, because what the NHL has said, Gary Bettman said we're not in expansion mode right now, that doesn't mean they're not considering it. And with the noise from Atlanta growing significantly in recent weeks, and the NHL wanting to stay ahead of the other major leagues in regards to league size and being that first league to hit 33 and 34 teams, they want to attract owners before the other leagues get potential ownership groups' eyes turned to baseball or NFL or NBA, even Major League Soccer. They want to stay ahead of the curve by having discussions, and discussions have been had with multiple locations. So there we go. There's my quick look at potential NHL expansion cities. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll have some more content for you all very, very soon.